What's up, Wolfpack? How you doing? Today we're back with another reacting video, and this dude's 74 gear is hilarious. He does like a lot of TV versus reality or Hollywood versus reality, and just like he's a pilot. Funny stories, all that kind of things. And yeah, let's go and listen. I know this is so different than what we normally do, but for a lot of y'all that don't know, I used to fly airplanes, so this is kind of. A lot of this stuff is funny to me. I like learning about this stuff, like looking at this. Pilot gets naked during a flight. I mean, like, how are you not going to click on that? Without further ado, let's get into it.
Air traffic control versus pilots.
Have you been cleared into the ramp?
Okay, connect with the ramp.
No, that was a question. Have the ramp people cleared you into the gate?
Roger, to the gate, Show 981.
Coming up. Hey 7-4 crew, welcome back. If you don't know me, my name's Kelsey. I'm a 747 pilot. My channel 7-4 Gear is all about aviation. Over the last couple of years, I've had several people send me this clip on Instagram of Air China in JFK and ask me, how can this happen to a professional pilot that's flying internationally? And I've had a few other clips sent to me as well. So I put them all together, and today we're doing air traffic control versus pilots. Let's get into it.
Beaver 15 kilo heavy speed 180 or greater till 5 DME.
I can't do that, Mom. It'll be 160 or greater till 5.
Okay, you gotta give me more than 160 from now though, so when are you gonna flow to 160?
Yeah, I get that, Mom, but I am flying a 747 and I have stabilized approach criteria which I must maintain.
Okay, and you still haven't answered my question, so whenever you get around to that, that'd be great.
Yeah, okay, I'm reducing now to 160 knots.
Alright, approach clearance canceled, time left heading 130.
Okay, approach cancel, turn left heading, please.
130.
130, and the reason for that is?
I just need you to maintain 160 for at least 3 more miles.
This is clearly a pissing contest between air traffic control and the pilots. And you have the pilot reminding her that he's a 747 pilot.
Yeah, I get that, Mom, but I am flying a 747.
That's not something you ever need to tell air traffic control. They know what type of plane you're flying, they know what the capabilities and the normal speeds are of your plane because they deal with it on a daily basis. It'd be one thing if you were going into a small airport that isn't used to dealing with your type of an aircraft, but JFK's been seeing 747s for a long time, so they know the types of speeds they can generally give you and get you to do in order to accomplish what it is that they want to accomplish on their end. The pilot is saying he cannot do it because of stabilized approach criteria, which is a real thing that does exist.
And I have stabilized approach criteria which I must maintain.
I don't know what their approach criteria is for British Airways, and their call sign Speedbird, so that's who they're talking to. I don't know what their approach criteria is. For us, it's to be stable at 1,000 feet. A few things that will typically be in stabilized approach criteria are things like the power settings. So you're going to want the power setting to be something that'd be normal for that. So you're not going to want full power. You're not going to want idle power. If you've ever seen me do any of the Microsoft Flight Sim games, all of that is unstabilized approach. So you see what he's saying here is he needs to have it at a certain setting. But I think he could have gotten away with doing exactly what she was asking of him. This is an approach plate from Jeppesen, which is what 90% of the airlines use. The controller wanted 180 knots or greater to 5 DME. That means she wanted him to be doing 180 knots until they were 5 miles out from the airport. DME means distance measuring equipment. So she's saying, until you're 5 miles DME, 5 miles from the airport, I want you to do 180 knots. Some airlines, like mine, give you until 1,000 feet to be stabilized. So let's assume that British Airways has those same requirements of having to be stable at 1,000 feet. Itswooolf here is 5.3 miles from the runway, which is pretty close to the 5 miles she's asking for. He could have had the gear down and the flap set at 25 degrees for landing as he approached Itswooolf. Doing 180 knots as the aircraft crossed here, he could have just reduced the speed down 20 knots, and with the gear and flaps down, that plane would slow down very, very quickly. By having the gear down and the flaps out like that, it makes the engines work a little bit harder on your approach, but you still could have accomplished everything that you needed to accomplish and everything she wanted you to accomplish. There would have been roughly 2 miles to slow down before hitting 1,000 feet, and I'm not a math wizard. These approach plates that they use make it really, really simple. You can see here, 1,160 feet, you're 3 miles from the runway. I'm just doing basic ballpark math, which is really my kind of math. You can ask any of my teachers in school. Instead, what the pilot decided to do is flex that he's a 747 pilot, which I get it, I'm a 747 pilot, and you hear me talk about it in every video. But by doing that, it made the controller flex back and say, okay, you're going to break off your approach, which is essentially controller speak for you're going to go to the back of the line. At the end of the day, you have to follow your company's protocols and procedures and do what is going to be safest for your aircraft, your crew, and your passengers. But ATC, air traffic control, generally know what you can and cannot do. So if there's something that's going to be a little bit unique or different about your flight, that's something that you should be advising them ahead of time. Like I said, when they're coming in really heavy and there's a lot of small planes and we can hear them around, we'll tell them ahead of time, hey, we're going to be coming in very fast, so that way they can give us extra room to get and close down on that aircraft ahead of us. Maybe they're normally giving 3 miles of separation between each plane, and they might give us 5 or 6. And they're able to kind of figure out how much room they need to give you based on how fast you need to go. I think they honestly could have both done a little bit better here. The pilot didn't need to flex. He could have done more to help them go maybe faster, a little longer. Ask, hey, can we do it until 6 miles or something like that? Instead, what he wanted to do is say, like, I'm the boss. And at the end of the day, air traffic control is coordinating a lot of different planes that are around there. So it's better to work with them and ask, hey, can I do it till 6? Or can I do 170? Or ask something instead of just try to lay down the law, like, I'm the boss and this is what I'm going to do. The only time you can really do that is when you declare an emergency, and then you get to do whatever you want, and that's not what's happening here. All right, let's see what's next.
Check in.
Yes, we're trying to 4 right.
1728, can you accept runway 4 left?
I'm afraid we're just a little bit committed to 4 right.
You say you have commitment issues, sir?
We want to stay on 4 right.
I understand. It's just a little joke, Mary 1728, following a bus short, final traffic holding crossing runway 101014, 4 right, settle in.
Land 4 right, American 1728. I got it, bud.
I don't know which airport this is, but let's just say it's Boston since they have a 4 left and a 4 right with a crossing runway. Sometimes it'll happen when you're lined up to land on a runway, air traffic control will ask you if you want to swap to a parallel runway or maybe one on the other side of the airport. Sometimes it's to help you out and sometimes it's to help them out. If you're the pilot flying, as soon as you hear this,
Mary 1728, can you accept runway 4 left?
you're going to want to quickly evaluate your options, and that's going to be based off of what you're set up for, your flying ability, the weather conditions, and all those things. Because what's going to happen is the other pilot is just going to look at you, and they're going to want a very quick response because usually you're lined up on a runway and you're going to need to make that decision quickly. So as soon as you hear the air traffic control asking that, you need to already be making that decision because as soon as they look at you, you're going to need to tell them, yes, we can do it, or no, we can't. Realize that if you decide to make the decision to get off of your approach and get onto another runway, that may be helping air traffic control or it may be helping you, it depends. But you're also going to have things that are not going to be loaded up. That means you're going to have to disconnect and hand fly. It means your approach isn't going to have the autopilot and everything set up if you need to do a missed approach. There's a lot of different things, and it's all going to also depend on what your company procedures are. So you got to kind of factor all that in a very quick second because you need to make a decision quickly. I personally have done both. I've said, yes, let's make the switch, and then we jump over. And I've had other times where I say, no, I don't want to do it. It all just depends on the circumstances, how you're feeling, everything that's going on, and you want to take the safest way and the safest decision every time. Let's take a look at this here at Boston Airport. He's asking him to switch from this one to this one.
Longer
and the
runway.
reason may be he wants to have someone take off from runway 9 here. You don't have to take the decision to swap the runways. They aren't going to be mad at you. You aren't going to get a free beer once you land. It doesn't really matter. They're just asking if you can do it. The next thing you hear him say is traffic on the crossing runway.
20, following a bus short, final traffic holding crossing runway.
I assume he wanted to let someone take off from runway 9 here. I've flown out of Boston a lot. I remember 9 being one that they would take off from, but it could have been any of these runways. Also, you can hear air traffic control making some jokes and the pilots are being a bit dry. Sometimes it's the pilots making joke, it's air traffic control not getting it. Sometimes the other way around. Just like in every business, you're going to have people that are fun and want to have some laughs and other people who just want to keep it all business. I will say, from my experience, that's not something you want to do early on in your career. I don't really hear it from any other controllers, other places in the world, but I do hear it between American pilots and American controllers. I hear it more there than anywhere else in the world, and I think that has something to do with the language barrier. Obviously, when you're in other places in the world, you typically aren't going to be making jokes because things may get lost in the communication there. I have seen a lot of times when we check in, let's say in South America or in Europe, we might check in and say like hello or good day in their language, but that's about it. That's about as far as the joking goes. The rest of it is very standard phraseology and the things that you're doing. I generally only hear the jokes happening like that between American pilots and American controllers because it's the same. The controllers don't want foreign pilots to be confused. If they make a joke like that, it may get lost in translation.
I'll say the jokes also do happen a lot when you work or when you're landing at like the same place over and over again. And if you know the people at air traffic control, like, hey, yo, what up, Adam? Like, I've heard it before. Shit's crazy. It's like, hey, how's your day doing? A long time no see. And it's like, trying to fly an airplane over here. What are you doing, bud? It's awkward being that guy. But, yeah, they definitely crack a lot of fucking jokes.
All right, let's get to the next one.
Air China 981, make the right turn here at Juliet, join Alpha, hold short of Mike Alpha.
Big report.
Hey, right, Julia, hold, well, taxi Alpha, hold in November. Now continue now, taxi now.
Make the right turn here at Juliet, join Alpha, hold short of Mike Alpha, Air China 981.
Air China 981, right here, join, right, Julia, join Alpha, hold short in November.
Okay, I'll say it again, hold short of Mike Alpha, M-A, Mike Alpha, not November.
Okay, hold short of Mike Alpha 981.
Well, this is a super famous air traffic control versus pilot video. I'm sure many of you have heard it. There's more to the video, which I'm going to get into in just a second. Sometimes air traffic control at airports, and this is just my opinion, in some cities like New York, LaGuardia, Chicago, they speak very, very fast, and it's hard for me as a native English speaker sometimes to put together everything that's happening. That's not really the case in this specific circumstance, but sometimes you'll hear them talking very, very fast, and you hear foreign pilots get a little bit lost. And that's just because there's so much that's happening on those airports that they need to keep all the planes moving. Personally, I think it'd be better if they spoke slower, but I'm not up there, so I don't know what their workload is like and how they're coordinating everything. Even though English is the primary language for aviation, and that works out great for me as being an American, I've seen pilots that have struggled, from international pilots, also new pilots, struggle when air traffic control, especially on ground with taxiing, they get overwhelmed with everything that's going on. That being said, it's always better to clarify before you make a mistake. If the other pilot doesn't hear what was being said, or didn't hear or didn't understand, it's better to clarify, ask air traffic control, hey, did you say this or did you say that? That's not what's happening in this situation. Air traffic control is speaking in a very calm, cool, slow way for Air China to understand, and you're going to see why in a second they didn't understand it. Here's a chart that we use to taxi in JFK. I'm going to make some assumptions. The plane is right here. Air traffic control is telling them to go right on Juliet, join Alpha, and hold short of Mike Alpha up here. So now it kind of gives you an idea of where they're at in the airport and what's going on. Now let me play you the second part.
Air China 981, have they cleared you into the ramp?
Roger, ramp to the ramp Air China 981.
Okay, they have cleared you into the ramp. Air China 981, ground. Air China 981, Kennedy ground.
981, go ahead.
Have you been cleared into the ramp?
Okay, connect with the ramp.
No, that was a question. Have the ramp people cleared you into the gate?
Roger, to the gate, Air China 981.
I'll try it again. It's a question. Hold your position. This is a question. Interrogative. Have you been cleared into your gate?
Okay, well, hold here.
Okay, how about the question? Have they cleared you into the gate?
Tower, ground Air China 981, we are, gate number 3 is open. We are taxi to the November.
Air China 981, taxi to the ramp.
Roger, taxi to the ramp.
Okay, obviously I added the clips of Snoop Dogg in there, and just because it's kind of what I imagined them doing when they weren't responding. Obviously that's not what was really going on. You might be wondering, how can someone say Mike Alpha and the other person hear November? They don't sound anything alike. There's something that you may not know if you're not an airline pilot, and that's before you land at a given runway, you're given the gate that you're going to be parking at. Usually once you land, the ground control might ask where you're parking at, and you need to know where you're going to go. And you also need to plan, once you land, where you're going to be taxiing to get there. Honestly, on the ground, there is a lot more going on for the pilots than up in the air. You heard the pilot say gate number 3 is open.
Gate number 3 is open. We are taxi to the November.
That means the pilot knows he's parking at gate number 3. The reason that's important is because there's something known as expectation bias. Expectation bias is when you say something and assume already what's going to be said back to you. You've seen that with guys that you go out and they go up to a girl and they say, oh, I'm a pilot. and the girl is like,
Nobody cares what you do, Vic.
but your pilot friend here,
Why you put a baby in me?
that is expectation bias. It works the other way as well. You've seen in a lot of movies, a guy will walk up to a pretty girl in a bar and he'll ask her for a number and she'll say, yeah, I'll give you my number. And he goes, I understand you don't want to talk to me, and then walk away. It's the same thing. You're going into something with an expectation of what's going to be told to you, not listening to what's actually happening. The other thing that you don't get from this audio is that JFK has a lot going on, and that is once you land, you have to contact, while you're listening to the ground frequency, you have to contact the ramp frequency and find out if your gate is open and if you're cleared into the gate. Then you have to come back to ground and tell ground, ramp clear ascent. They don't coordinate that for you like at a lot of airports. I personally would love to see that the ground and ramp control can coordinate those things without having the pilots be monitoring the ground, calling to the ramp while taxiing a couple 100,000 pounds of airplane and a few hundred people behind them, but I'm not in charge of those things. Take a look at the ramp chart here at JFK. Here is parking spot number 3, which is where they're going to be parking. And he keeps saying November. Why November? Well, now you see why. It's the entry into his parking area. On the approach coming in there, the pilots probably talked about it several times of how they were going to land and how they were going to taxi in, and they kept planning on a November entry. Some pilots aren't able to think outside the box and don't listen carefully. These pilots were obviously not listening carefully enough when the guy kept saying Mike Alpha. They kept hearing November because November is what they planned on. So it's very important, this expectation bias, that you don't hear what you're expecting to hear. You listen to what's being said. All right, last one.
Air France 6, what gate are you waiting for?
France 6, still waiting for our gate.
Yes, and what gate would that be?
Gate 8, Air France. Ground Air France 006 Super, gate 8.
Ricky Bobby.
Is available for us.
No, it's not. They lied to you. So just hold there. I'll call you when it's available. I don't need you to tell me what I can see and you can't.
Okay.
So this is an Air France A380. You know it's an A380 because they have the call sign Super. You have a 747, that's going to be a heavy. A lot of different larger aircraft will be heavy. There's only one Super, that's the Airbus A380. And I just love the way the French say Super. You just couldn't say it more French than that.
Ground Air France 006 Super.
I got a buddy of mine, and we've been friends for a long time. And sometimes when we hang out, there's certain words that he says, and I'm like, you say that so French. It's just so funny to me. This is my take on this. The controller was being aggressive and rude to Air France unnecessarily. Air France was told that they were cleared into park. The controller didn't need to be that aggressive and say, you don't know, this is what's going on for real. It wasn't necessary. I knew as soon as that pilot said okay and unkeyed the mic, he said a bunch of probably terrible things to the other pilots in French. I know that I would have if I was in their situation, and probably over the years I had. And sometimes when a pilot does that, what you say is, stuck mic is you kind of joke around because you obviously wouldn't be wanting to transmit all the terrible things that you said about the controller. But it wasn't necessary for this controller to be this rude to this pilot. And the pilot just said, okay, because there's no reason to push back on it. The controller's going to do what they want to do. If you want to go to the gate and file a report, you can. Is something going to change? Probably not. If you like these video breakdowns, you're going to love my viral debrief series where I break down different videos. I'll put a link to that video right here. And if you want to see something more fun, check out my Hollywood versus reality. I'll put a link to that video up here.
All right. If you enjoyed this kind of video, put in the comments. Let me know. Different. Very different. I know it's not gaming. Nothing to do with it. I just thought it was funny. But, yeah. Deuces.